Happy Monday, and welcome back to the Lorden Arts channel. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for spending some time with us here today. Case Cracked is the show where we look into a mystery and what are the critical pieces that help solve that mystery. Today's case is called Solved by NASA. The last time neighbors at the Four Seasons Motor Lodge saw 32-year-old Dawn Sanchez, she was getting into her boyfriend's tan and brown Pontiac Grand Prix with him and another man. It was August 30th, 1991, in El Camino Real, California, and Dawn had been living at the lodge since she left her previous job at the Mustang Ranch in Nevada as a sex worker. Because of the transient lifestyle she lived, no one thought to report her missing until October. But once law enforcement started looking into the case, reports they received of her and her life worried officers. The most disturbing reports were about her boyfriend, Bernardo Bass, a man described as very controlling and jealous. One man, who also lived at the lodge, claimed she had told him that Bass had assaulted her at least once in the past. Now, she was afraid to be alone with him. Others reported that Bass had broken into her room and went through her address book, looking for men that he thought she was interested in. He then slashed their car tires to send a message. Others told about how Dawn claimed that he also carried a gun and might have killed one man who propositioned her. When officers caught up with Bass, he claimed that he was just one of Dawn's clients, nothing more, and had not threatened or killed anyone. He told them he had no idea what even happened to her. Everyone's outlook would change, however, when they found and talked to the third member of the party that day in the car, William Alcorn, also known as Chopsticks. His story was very different from Bass's. He claimed in a videotaped interview that on the 30th, he, Dawn, and Bass had bought drugs before traveling to a vacant lot near the Twin Creek softball park in Sunnyvale. They spent some time in the lot, but while everyone was out of the vehicle, suddenly Bass jumped back in with Dawn, started the car, and drove it 100 yards away. Alcorn then heard the couple argue for some time before suddenly hearing a gunshot. Bass then sped away in the car, leaving Alcorn in the lot alone. Officers knew that Dawn, who was a small woman at 4'11" tall and only 109 pounds, stood little chance of defending herself against someone who was armed, and they believed Alcorn's version of events. When officers went back to Bass with a search warrant, they didn't find his car, but they did find love letters that he had written to Dawn. In those letters, he talked of the two marrying and having children. When his family was questioned, his sister stated that yes, he did own the Pontiac Grand Prix, but she had sold it for him at his request. Officers, however, were unable to find the car or who exactly it was sold to. In October, Bass was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murder. Immediately, the prosecution started to hit roadblocks. Alcorn, their main witness, was now refusing to testify, and the videotaped interview police conducted had been lost. Luckily, written transcripts of his account had been taken and were used in its place. This prosecution was already going to be an uphill battle. Remember, they had no body, no car, and no gun, the items that with proper forensic testing could prove that he actually murdered her. Court proceedings would drag on until finally, a year later, the case was dismissed for lack of evidence and Bass was set free. Dawn's case never sat for long, as investigators year after year continued to search for her. Excavations were conducted, search warrants served and executed, and divers searched numerous nearby waterways, but never found anything. Bass went on to have quite a criminal career. In 2003, he fractured his brother's skull during a fight. Later, he violated a restraining order against one of his ex-girlfriends and found himself back in jail. In 2007, the search for justice for Dawn would get a much-needed shot of hope. An informant claimed that the Pontiac Grand Prix had been disassembled and then buried in an abandoned salvage yard lot in Alviso, California. With this new tip, investigators renewed their efforts and started questioning Bass and Dawn's families. They also received a warrant to search the Bass family property. When officers questioned his sister again about the missing Grand Prix, she changed her story. She claimed that she had lied to detectives in 1991 because her brother told her what to say, and she was too afraid of him not to. Despite this fact, no one knew where Dawn or the car was. Officers found that Bass's parents' property in Santa Clara consisted of 2 side-by-side lots. Their son lived in a converted garage in the rear yard. When they searched the 500-square-foot space that Bass had called home for 20 years, they found his windows were boarded up, and his bedroom closet contained something very strange. The back wall had a kind of niche that was 20 inches wide and 4 feet deep. One family member stated that 2 years before the search, Bass told them, quote, "I have to seal this off in case the police ever search here." No remains were found, but cadaver dogs confirmed the scent of human remains in that small space. With their new information and evidence in hand, investigators charged Bass, who was already in jail on an unrelated count, for Dawn's murder. Before they could definitively prove their case, they needed William Alcorn's testimony, and they needed to search that salvage lot. In 2008, they located Alcorn, who immediately invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. They couldn't get their testimony there, but believed that the judge would allow his written testimony from back in 1991. Then, the district attorney's office faced its next hurdle while attempting to search the vacant salvage yard. With the ground so full of old metal debris, it was impossible to use conventional metal detectors to locate Bass's car. So in 2010, they did something unconventional. NASA scientists had been working with the U.S. Geological Survey and Carnegie Mellon University to develop a rover that could map magnetic environments on both terrestrial and extraterrestrial missions. The DA's office hoped that they would be able to use NASA's ground-penetrating radar to search for the car. Technicians used the Sensetta Max 50A rover on the salvage yard to map locations they felt were possible hiding spots. Those results were taken back to the DA's office. Those results were also successful. Using Sensetta's data, after 19 years of searching, they finally found and retrieved car parts to Bass's Grand Prix. Now, they had some form of physical evidence directly related to the crime to work with in court. Prosecutors would claim that Bass had indeed shot and killed Dawn in 1991, just as Alcorn originally testified. He then stored her body in the niche in his closet for some time while his car, which contained her blood, was disassembled and buried. To this day, no one knows where Dawn's body or the gun that killed her ultimately wound up. Bass, who still proclaims his innocence, won't say. When he was confronted with the car parts and the possibility of spending 25 years to life in jail, on August 21, 2009, almost 18 years after her murder, Bass accepted a plea deal of no contest to involuntary manslaughter. In a no contest plea, the defendant does not admit to guilt, but acknowledges there's enough evidence to convict if the case should go to trial. He was then sentenced to 6 years in prison, with time served dating back to 1991 and including his present stay, that would leave him serving only 2 additional years. This resolution was reached with the consent of Dawn's family, who wanted justice served, even if it wasn't for the length of time that they wanted. As Nick Moyo, spokesman for the district attorney's office, spoke to reporters, he explained their decision. Quote, "While no amount of time is sufficient to compensate the victim's family or the community for the killing of a human being, this resolution brings some measure of closure to a case that had remained uncharged and unresolved from 1991 to 2007 when it was refiled." Dawn's mother is heartbroken that her daughter has never been found. The two would talk on the telephone frequently, but one day the call stopped and she never heard from her again. That, she says, is when she knew something was wrong. She hopes that someday her daughter will finally be found so she could put her to rest in a place her family can visit and maybe, finally, find some measure of peace. Case cracked. I would like to thank Gizmodo.com, Charlie Project, MercuryNews.com, ZDNet.com, NBCBayArea.com, Popular Science, CMU.edu, NamUs, the Doe Network, and NASA.gov. Of course, a very big thank you also goes to Christy Arnhart for researching and writing up today's case, and here she is to talk with us about it right now. Welcome back, Christy. Thank you for joining us again today, and wow. Solved by NASA. Never thought that was going to be a title on one of these episodes. What do you think about that?
That's something I've never run into before, but I love it. It's incredible that all of these different agencies can use what they have to help each other, kind of like the MVAC. That was originally going to be for food service.
Right.
So it's neat. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, I guess we have heard a little bit of like footage being sent to different companies that have different technologies. I don't know if NASA in particular, maybe NASA. I think JPL has received footage, like really badly degraded video footage or videotape footage that they're trying to enhance. But nothing like this where they're actually rolling out technology from a rover and mapping what's under the ground. I think that's such a clever thing. And I really appreciate it because that's a big part of what we're trying to do here with Case Cracked is learn about these different things that are done to solve these cases. And going unconventional like that, I don't know who put that together, but man, that's someone that really cared about this case in a very strong way.
It is, and I'm really glad to see that they did.
Yeah, and speaking about caring about this case in a strong way, not very typical that we would see a case about someone that was in this line of work in particular. Yeah, someone that had worked at the Mustang Ranch, someone that worked in sex work, get this level of attention, it seems like, from law enforcement.
Usually you wouldn't see that now.
Yeah. So, and outside of that, the press. I mean, obviously, when we talked about the sources on this, I can't believe how many sources you went through to pull this together.
I know.
So, yeah, it was kind of special for me to, and I hope this is a trend that we see more of, kind of people.
Oh, me too.
Yeah, just being more humane and less dismissive of people because of what their occupation or what their lifestyles are. And it's weird because this story had a bunch of the like warning indicators for, don't put this on major media, essentially. But thankfully, people are telling the story, and hope that makes people think twice about stuff like this and just writing it off. Also,
my only real regret was that I couldn't find more about her life and who she was. Usually, I like to put more of that in there, but it was old enough I couldn't find any more information. But
yeah.
I'm glad I learned what I did.
Yeah, and that's a tough one from, anytime you hit kind of before 95, 96, the research in the cases on the digital front is just a whole different thing. But yeah. Also very interesting, we've got effectively a conviction for a no-body homicide. Bodies never recovered. You did mention at one point that they believed there was blood in the car. Do you know if did they find parts of the car that they were able to test and confirm that there was blood?
Not that I could find, no. I don't know if it was so degraded from having been in the ground,
right,
or if it just wasn't, referred to. Okay,
so they're just making the assumption based on the story that they had from Alcorn and what had happened to the car, because obviously something's going to really motivate you if you're going to the point of disassembling a car and then burying parts of it in a salvage yard like that. So I think that's
definitely,
pretty fair assumption. And then one of the hard aspects of this story is ultimately he winds up only getting 6 years for a murder case like this, which is an extreme light sentence, and especially when they roll for his time served, and he's only essentially getting an additional 2-year extension on his existing sentence. But I really like the aspect that they consulted with Dawn's family and made sure that was the approach that they were okay with. And maybe that's what you got to do, is take what you can get in situations like that. I don't know. I hope to never know the dilemma that they were faced when it was laid out for them that, hey, we've got a plea that he can take here, but he's only going to get a few more years. I imagine that was heartbreaking in one way, but maybe after waiting so long for some form of justice, also, what they were looking for in another.
It could have been. I did appreciate, that they talked to the family. And I got to thinking about that too, because I had made a statement earlier on one of the other shows about it shouldn't matter how old the crime is or how old the person is when they're caught. It should be prosecuted. Yeah. But I'd like to amend that and say I think the family should be included in that decision at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, after that period of time, there are families that don't want to go any further.
Yeah.
So they really should listen to what they have to say too.
Definitely. Yeah, we've certainly run into those cases as well, where certain families are just like, this was so long ago and it's hurt. It's painful to look at, and we need to move in a different direction. And I think we can certainly understand that part of humanity as well. And a little pat on the back for you. I wish I could reach over and actually pat you on the. Here we go. That's part of what I love about Brain Scratch and Case Cracked and Searchlight is coming to conclusions like that. We kind of sometimes make assumptions, and sometimes we have to amend those based on new information. And that's what we're doing. And I hope you guys are doing it too. Thank you so much for your hard work on this, Christy. Really appreciate that. And I've got some other people to thank right now. Thank you, new patrons, Rianne Hale, April Harmon, and Lisa Corinne. Special thank you to Laura Rodriguez and Rebecca DeMarco for increasing your pledges. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, or buy merchandise. Case Cracked is frequently demonetized by YouTube, but we know that learning about the mechanisms that help support and find justice in these cases is very important to understand the many unsolved cases that we also cover, and we really appreciate your support in allowing us to continue doing that. Remember, you can get another Lord and Arts story every week on the Seriously Mysterious podcast. A new episode is coming tomorrow and every Tuesday after that. Visit seriouslymysterious.com and remember to subscribe on your favorite podcatchers. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you'd like to catch one of our weekly Secret Studio live shows. And of course, I'll be back with a new Unsolved Mystery for you on Friday, right here on the Lord and Arts channel.